Good evening once again, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes here for story time. We continue with our book, The Maltese Falcon, and tonight we begin with chapter 16, The Third Murder. Spade went into the Hotel Sutter and telephoned to the Alexandria. Gutman was not in. No member of Gutman's party was in. Spade telephoned the Belvedere. Cairo was not in, had not been in that day. Spade went to his office. A swart, greasy man in notable clothes was waiting in the outer room. Effie Perrine, indicating the swart man, said, "This gentleman wishes to see you, Mr. Spade." Spade smiled and bowed and opened the inner door. "Come in." Before following the man in, Spade asked Effie Perrine, "Any news on the other matter?" "No, sir." The swart man was the proprietor of a moving picture theater in Market Street. He suspected one of the cashiers and a doorman of colluding to defraud him. Spade hurried him through the story, promised to take care of it, asked for and received $50, and got rid of him in less than half an hour. When the corridor door had closed behind the showman, Effie Perrine came into the inner office. Her sunburned face was worried and questioning. "You haven't found her yet?" she asked. He shook his head and went on stroking his bruised temples slightly in circles with his fingertips. "How is it?" she asked. "All right, but I've got plenty of a headache." She went around behind him, put his hand down, and stroked his temple with her slender fingers. He leaned back until the back of his head was over the top of the chair rest and leaned against her breast. He said, "You're an angel." She bent her head forward over his and looked down into his face. "You've got to find her, Sam. It's more than a day, and she—" He stirred and impatiently interrupted her. "I haven't got to do anything, but if you'll let me rest this damn head a minute or two, I'll go out and find her." She murmured, "Poor head," and stroked it in silence a while. Then he asked, "You know where she is? Have you any idea?" The telephone bell rang. Spade picked up the telephone and said, "Hello?" "Yes, Sid. It came out all right. Thanks. No. Sure." He got snotty. "But so did I. He's nursing a gambler's war pipe dream. Well, we didn't kiss when we parted. I declared my weight and walked out on him. That's something for you two to worry about, right? Bye." He put down the telephone and leaned back in his chair again. Effie Perrine came from behind him and stood at his side. She demanded, "Do you think you know where she is, Sam?" "I know where she went," he replied in a grudging tone. "Where?" She was excited. "Down to the boat you saw burning." Her eyes opened until the brown was surrounded by white. "You went down there?" It was not a question. "I did not," Spade said. "Sam," she cried angrily, "she may be—" "She went down there," he said in a surly voice. "She wasn't taken. She went down there instead of going to your house when she learned the boat was in. Well, what the hell? Am I supposed to run around after all my clients begging them to let me help them?" "But Sam, when I told you the boat was on fire, that was at noon, and I had a date with Polhas and another with Brian." She glared at him between tightened lids. "Sam Spade," she said, "you're the most contemptible man God ever made when you want to be, because she did something without confiding in you. You'd sit there and do nothing when you know she's in danger. When you know she might be—" Spade's face flushed. He said stubbornly, "She's pretty capable of taking care of herself, and she knows where to come for help when she thinks she needs it, and when it suits her." "That's spite," the girl cried, "and that's all it is. You are sore because she did something on her own hook without telling you. Why shouldn't she? You're not so damned honest, and you haven't been so much on the level with her that she should trust you completely." Spade said, "That's enough of that." His tone brought a brief uneasy glint into her hot eyes, but she tossed her head and the glint vanished. Her mouth was drawn taut and small. She said, "If you don't go down there this very minute, Sam, I will, and I'll take the police down there." Her voice trembled, broke, and was thin and wailing. "Oh, Sam, go!" He stood up, cursing her. Then he said, "Christ, it'll be easier on my head than sitting here and listening to you squawk." He looked at his watch. "You might as well lock up and go home." She said, "I won't. I'm going to wait right here until you come back." He said, "Do as you damn please," put on his hat, flinched, took off, and went out carrying it in his hand. An hour and a half later, at 20 minutes past 5, Spade returned. He was cheerful. He came in asking, "What makes you so hard to get along with, sweetheart?" "Me?" "Yes, you." He put a finger on the tip of Effie Perine's nose and flattened it. He put his hands under her elbows, lifted her straight up, and kissed her chin. He set her down on the floor again and asked, "Anything doing while I was gone?" "Luke, what's his name, at the Belvedere called to tell you that Cairo has returned. That was about half an hour ago." Spade snapped his mouth shut, turned with a long step, and started for the door. "Did you find her?" the girl called. "Tell you about it when I'm back," he replied without pausing, and hurried out. A taxicab brought Spade to the Belvedere within 10 minutes of his departure from his office. He found Luke in the lobby. The hotel detective came grinning and shaking his head to meet Spade. 15 minutes late," he said. "Your bird has fluttered." Spade cursed his luck. "Checked out, gone, bag and baggage," Luke said. He took a battered memorandum book from a vest pocket, licked his thumb, thumbed the pages, and held the book out open to Spade. "There's the number of the taxi that hauled him. I got that much for you." "Thanks." Spade copied the number on the back of an envelope. "Any forwarding address?" "No." He just come in carrying a big suitcase and went upstairs and packed and come down with the stuff and paid his bill and got a taxi and went out without anybody being able to hear what he had told the driver. "How about his trunk?" Luke's lower lip sagged. "By God," he said, "I forgot that. Come on." They went up to Cairo's room. The trunk was there. It was closed, but not locked. They raised the lid. The trunk was empty. Luke said, "What do you know about that?" Spade did not say anything. Spade went back to his office. Effie Perrine looked at him inquisitively. "Missed him," Spade grumbled, and passed into his private room. She followed him in. He sat in his chair and began to roll a cigarette. She sat on the desk in front of him, put her toes on the corner of his chair seat. "What about Miss O'Shaughnessy?" she demanded. "I missed her too," he replied. "But she had been there." "On the Paloma?" "The la is a lousy combination," he said. "Stop it. Be nice, Sam. Tell me." He set fire to his cigarette, pocketed his lighter, patted his shins, and said, "Yes, La Paloma. She got down there a little after noon yesterday." He pulled his brows down. "That means she went straight thereafter, leaving the cab at the ferry building. It's only a few piers away. The captain wasn't aboard. His name was Jacoby, and she asked for him by name. He was uptown on business. That would mean he didn't expect her, or at the time anyway. She waited there till she came back at 4 o'clock. They spent the time from then till mealtime in his cabin. She ate with him." He inhaled and exhaled the smoke, turned his head aside and spit a yellow tobacco flake off his lip, and went on. "After the meal, Captain Jacoby had 3 more visitors. One of them was Gutman, and one was Cairo, and one was the kid who delivered Gutman's message to you yesterday. Those 3 came together while Bridget was there, and the 5 of them did a lot of talking in the captain's cabin. It's hard to get anything out of the crew, but they had a row, and somehow around 11 o'clock that night, a gun went off there in the captain's cabin. The watchman beat it down there, but the captain met him outside and told him everything was all right. There's a fresh bullet hole in the corner of the cabin, up high enough to make it likely that the bullet didn't go through anybody to get there. As far as I could learn, there was only one shot, but as far as I could learn, wasn't very far." He scowled and inhaled smoke. "Well, they left around midnight, the captain and his 4 visitors all together, and all of them seem to have been walking all right. I got that from the watchman. I haven't been able to get a hold of the custom house men who were on duty then. That's all of it. The captain hasn't been back since. He didn't keep a date. He had this noon with some shipping agents, and they haven't found him to tell him about the fire." "And the fire?" she asked. Spade shrugged. "I don't know. It was discovered in the hold aft, in the rear basement, late this morning. The chances are it got started sometime yesterday. They got it out all right, though it did damage enough. Nobody liked to talk about it much while the captain was away. It's the corridor door opened. Spade shut his mouth. Effie Perrine jumped down from the desk, but a man opened the connecting door before she could reach it. "Where's Spade?" the man asked. His voice brought Spade up erect and alert in his chair. It was a voice harsh and rasping, with agony and with straining to keep two words from being smothered by the liquid bubbling that ran under and behind them. Effie Perrine, frightened, stepped out of the man's way. He stood in the doorway with his soft hat crushed between his head and the top of the door frame. He was nearly 7 feet tall. A black overcoat, cut and straight and like a sheath, buttoned from the throat to the knees, exaggerated his leanness. His shoulders stuck out, high, thin, angular. His bony face, weather coarsened, aged, was the color of wet sand, and was wet with sweat on his cheeks and chin. His eyes were dark and bloodshot, and mad above lower lids that hung down to show pink inner membrane. Held tight against the left side of his chest by a black-sleeved arm that ended in a yellowish claw was a brown paper-wrapped parcel bound with thin rope, an ellipsoid somewhat larger than an American football. The tall man stood in the doorway, and there was nothing to show that he saw Spade. He said, "You know," and then the liquid bubbling came in his throat and submerged whatever else he said. He put his other hand out over the hand that held the ellipsoid, holding himself stiffly straight, not putting his hands out to break his fall. He fell forward as the tree falls. Spade, wooden-faced and nimble, sprang from the chair and caught the falling man. When Spade caught the man, his mouth opened and a little blood spurted out, and the brown paper parcel dropped from the man's hands and rolled across the floor until a foot of the desk stopped it. The man's knees bent, and he bent at the waist, and his thin body became limber inside the sheath-like coat, sagging in Spade's arms so that Spade could not hold it from the floor. Spade lowered the man carefully until he lay on the floor on his left side. The man's eyes, dark and bloodshot, but not now mad, were wide open and still. His mouth was wide open and blood had spurted from it, but no more blood came from it, and all his long body was as still as the floor it lay on. Spade said, "Lock the door." While Effie Perrine had her teeth chattering, she fumbled the corridor door's lock, and Spade knelt beside the man, turned him over on his back, and ran his hand down the side of his overcoat. When he withdrew the hand, presently it came out smeared with blood. The sight of this bloody hand brought not the least nor briefest of changes to Spade's face. Holding that hand up where it would touch nothing, he took his lighter out of his pocket with his other hand. He snapped on the flame and held the flame close to the first one and then the other of the man's eyes. The eyelids, balls, irises, and pupils remained frozen, immobile. Spade extinguished the flame and returned the lighter to his pocket. He moved on his knees around the dead man's side and, using his one clean hand, unbuttoned and opened the tubular overcoat. The inside of the overcoat was wet with blood, and double-breasted blue jacket beneath it was sodden. The jacket's lapels there were crossed over the man's chest, and both sides of his overcoat immediately below the point were pierced by soggy, ragged holes. Spade rose and went to the washbowl in the outer office. Effie Perrine, wan and trembling, and holding herself upright by means of a hand on the corridor door's knob, and her back against the glass, whispered, Is he... Yes. Shot through the chest, maybe half a dozen times. Spade began to wash his hands. Oughtn't we... she began, but he cut her short. It's too late for a doctor now, and I've got to think before we do anything. He finished washing his hands and began to rinse the bowl. He couldn't have come far with those in him. Why in the hell would he have stood up that long enough to say something? He frowned at the girl, rinsed his hands again, and picked up a towel. Pull yourself together. For Christ's sake, don't get sick on me. He threw a towel down and ran fingers through his hair. Well, have a look at that bundle. He went into the inner office again, stepped over the dead man's legs, and picked up the brown wrapped parcel. When he felt its weight, his eyes glowed. He put it on his desk, turned it over so that the knotted part of the rope was uppermost. The knot was hard and tight. He took his pocket knife out and cut the rope. The girl had left the door and, edging around the dead man with her face turned away, had come to Spade's side. As she stood there, hands on the corner of the desk, watching him pull the rope loose and push aside the brown paper, excitement began to supplement nausea in her face. "Do you think it is?" she whispered. "We'll soon know," Spade said, his big fingers busy with the inner husk of the coarse gray paper, 3 sheets thick, that brown paper's removal had revealed. His face was hard and dull. His eyes were shining. When he had put the gray paper out of the way, he had an egg-shaped mass of pale excelsior, wadded tight. His fingers tore the wad apart, and when he had the foot-high figure of a bird, black as coal and shiny where its polish was not dulled by wood dust and fragments of excelsior. Spade laughed. He put a hand down on the bird. His wide spread fingers had ownership in their curving. He put his other arm around Effie Perrine and crushed her body against his. "We've got the damn thing, Angel," he said. "Ouch," she said. "You're hurting me." He took his arm away from her, picked the black bird up in both hands, and shook it to dislodge clinging excelsior. Then he stepped back, holding it in front of him, and blew dust off, regarding it triumphantly. Effie Perrine made a horrified face and screamed, pointing at his feet. He looked down at his feet. His last backward step had brought his left heel into contact with the dead man's body, pinching a 1/4 of an inch of flesh at a side of the palm between the heel and the floor. Spade jerked his foot away from the hand. The telephone bell rang. He nodded at the girl. She turned to the desk and put the receiver to her ear. She said, "Hello? Yes? Who? Oh, yes." Her eyes became large. "Yes, yes. Hold the line." Her mouth suddenly stretched wide and fearful. She cried, "Hello? Hello? Hello?" She rattled the prong up and down and cried, "Hello?" twice. Then she sobbed and spun around to face Spade, who was close beside her by now. "It was Miss O'Shaughnessy," she said wildly. "She wants you. She's at the Alexandria in danger. Her voice was, oh, it was awful, Sam. And something happened to her before she could finish. Go help her, Sam." Spade put the Falcon down on his desk and scowled gloomily. "I've got to take care of this fellow first," he said, pointing to his thumb at the thin corpse on the floor. She beat his chest with her fist, crying, "No, no, you've got to go. You've got to go to her. Don't you see, Sam? He had the thing that was hers, and he came to you with it. Don't you see? He was helping her, and they killed him, and now she's... Oh, you've got to go." "All right." Spade pushed her away and bent over his desk, putting the black bird back into the nest of the excelsior, bending the paper around it, working rapidly, making a larger, clumsy package. "As soon as I've gone, phone the police. Tell them how it happened, but don't drag any names in. You don't know. I got a phone call, and I told you I had to go out, but I didn't say where." He cursed the rope for being tangled, yanked it into straightness, and began to bind the package. "Forget this thing. Tell it as it happened, but forget he had a bundle." He chewed his lower lip. "Unless they pin you down. If they seem to know about it, you'll have to admit it, but that's not likely. If they do, then I took the bundle away with me, unopened." He finished tying the knot and straightened up with a parcel under his left arm. "Get it straight now. Everything happened the way it happened, but without the dingus, unless they already know about it. Don't deny it, just don't mention it. And I got a phone call, not you, and you don't know anything about anybody having anything to do with this. No connection with this fellow. You don't know anything about him, and you can't talk about my business until you see me. Got it?" "Yes, Sam." "Who do you know? Who is he?" He grinned wolfishly. Huh, he said. but I'd guess he was Captain Jacoby, master of the La Palma. The La Paloma? Yep. I think he was the captain. That's my guess. He picked up his hat and put it on. He looked thoughtfully at the dead man and then around the room. Hurry, Sam, the girl begged. Sure, he said absent-mindedly. I'll hurry. Might not hurt to get those few scraps of Excelsior off the floor before the police come, and maybe you ought to try to get hold of Sid. No, he rubbed his chin. We'll leave him out of it for a while. It'll look better. I'd keep the door locked till they come. He took his hand from his chin and rubbed his cheek. You're a damn good man, sister, he said, and went out. Chapter 17. Saturday night. Carrying the parcel lightly under his arm, walking briskly, with only the ceaseless shifting of his eyes to denote wariness, Spade went partly by way of an alley and a narrow court, from his office building to Kearny and Post Streets, where he hailed a passing taxicab. The taxicab carried him to Pickwick Stage Terminal in Fifth Street. He checked the bird at the parcel room there, put the check into a stamped envelope, wrote M.F. Holland and a San Francisco post office box number on the envelope, sealed it, and dropped it into a mailbox. From the stage terminal, another taxicab carried him to the Alexandria Hotel. Spade went up to Suite 12C and knocked on the door. The door was opened. When he knocked a second time, by a small, fair-haired girl in a shimmering yellow dress gown, a small girl whose face was white and dim, and who clung desperately to the inner doorknob with both hands and gasped, "Mr. Spade!" Spade said, "Yes," and caught her as she swayed. Her body arched back over his arm, and her head dropped straight back, so that her short, fair hair hung down her scalp, and her slender throat was a firm curve from her chin to her chest. Spade slid his supporting arm higher on her back and bent it to get his other arm under her knees. But she stirred then, resisting, and between parted lips that barely moved, blurted out the words, "No, ma, mi, wa." Spade made her walk. He kicked the door shut, and he walked up and down the green-carpeted room from wall to wall, one of his arms around her small body, that hand under her armpit. His other hand, gripping her other arm, held her erect. When she stumbled, checked her swaying, kept urging her forward, but made her tottering legs bear all the weight that they could bear. They walked across the floor, the girl faltering with incoordinate steps. Spade surely had the balls of his feet with balance unaffected by her staggering. Her face was chalk white and eyeless, his sullen, with eyes hardened to watch everywhere at once. He talked to her monotonously. "That's the stuff. Left, right, left, right. That's the stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we turn." He shook her as they turned from the wall. Now back again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your head up. That's the stuff. Good girl. Left, right, left, right. Now we turn again. He shook her again. That's the girl. Walk, 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 walk. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we go around. He shook her more and more roughly and increased their pace. That's the trick. Left, right, left, right. We're in a hurry. 1, 2, 3. She shuddered and swallowed audibly. Spade began to chafe her arm and sighed, and he put his mouth near her ear. "That's fine. You're doing fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. Faster, faster, faster. That's it. Step, step, step. Pick them up and lay them down. That's the stuff. Now we're turning. Left, right, left, right. What did they do? Dope you?" "The same stuff they gave me." Her eyelids twitched up, and for an instant, over dulled golden brown eyes, she managed to say all of yes, except the final consonant. They walked the floor, the girl almost trotting now to keep up with Spade, Spade slapping and kneading her flesh through yellow silk with both hands, talking talking, while his eyes remained hard and aloof and watchful. Left, right, left, right, turn. That's the girl. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the chin up. That's the stuff. 1, 2. Her lids lifted again, a bare fraction of an inch, and under them the eyes moved, weakly from side to side. That's fine, he said in a crisp voice, dropping his monotone. Keep them open. Open them wide, wide. He shook her. She moaned in protest, but her lids went farther back. Though her eyes were without inner light, he raised his hand and slapped her cheek half a dozen times in quick succession. She moaned again and tried to break away from him. Her arm held her and swept her along beside him from wall to wall. Keep walking, he ordered her in a harsh voice. Then, who are you? Her Rhea Gutman was a thick but intelligible. The daughter? Yes. Now she was no farther from the final consonant than shh. Where's Bridget? She twisted convulsively around in his arms and caught at one of his hands with both of hers. He pulled his hand away quickly and looked at her. Across its back was a thin red scratch of 1.5 inches or more in length. What the hell? He growled and examined her hands. Her left hand was empty. Her right hand, when forced it open, lay a 3-inch jade-headed steel bouquet pin. What the hell? He growled again and held the pin in front of her eyes. When she saw the pin, she whispered and opened her dressing gown. She pushed aside the cream-colored pajama coat under it and showed him her body below her left breast, white flesh crisscrossed with thin red lines, dotted with tiny red dots where the pin had scratched and punctured it. Stay awake, walk, till you came, she said. You'd come. We're so long. She swayed. Spade tightened his arm around her and said, walk. She fought against his arm, squirming around him to face him. No, tell you. Sleep, save her. Bridget, he demanded. Yes. Took her. Burlingame. 26 and show. Hurry, too. Late. Her head fell over her shoulder. Spade pushed her head up roughly. Who took you there? Your father? Yes. Wilmer. Cairo. She writhed and her eyelids twitched, but she did not open. Kill her. Her head fell over again, and again he pushed it up. Who shot Jacoby? She did not seem to hear the question. She tried pitifully to hold her head up, to open her eyes. She mumbled, Go, she. He shook her brutally. Stay awake till the doctor comes. Fear opened in her eyes, pushed for a moment the cloudiness from her face. No, no, she cried thickly. Father, kill me. Swear you won't. He know. I did, for her. Promise, won't. Sleep. All right. Morning. He shook her again. You're sure you can sleep the stuff off all right? Yeah. Her head fell down again. Where's your bed? She tried to raise her head, but the effort became too much for her before her hand pointed at nothing except the carpet. With a sigh of a tired child, she let her whole body relax and crumple. Spade caught her in his arms, scooped her up as she sank, and holding her easily against his chest, went to the nearest of the 3 doors. He turned the knob far enough to release the catch, pushed the door open with his foot, and went into a passageway that ran past an open bathroom door to a bedroom. He looked into the bathroom and saw it was empty, and carried the girl into the bedroom. Nobody was there. The clothing that was in sight and the things on the chiffonier said it was a man's room. Spade carried the girl back to the green carpeted room and tried the opposite door, through it, and passed into another passageway, past another empty bathroom, and into the bedroom that was a feminine room with its feminine accessories. He turned back to the bedclothes and laid the girl down on the bed, removed her slippers, raised her a little bit to slide the yellow dressing gown off, fixed a pillow under her head, and put the covers up over her. He then opened the room's 2 doors and stood with his back to them, staring at the sleeping girl. Her breathing was heavy but not troubled. He frowned and looked around, working his lips together. Twilight was dimming in the room. He stood there in the weakening light for perhaps 5 minutes. Finally, he shook his thick, sloping shoulders impatiently and went out, leaving the suite's outer door unlocked. Spade went to the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company station in Powell Street and called Devonport 2020. Emergency hospital, please. Hello, there's a girl in suite 12C at the Alexandria Hotel who's been drugged. Yes, you'd better send somebody to take a look at her. This is Mr. Hooper of the Alexandria. He put the receiver on its prong and laughed. He called another number and said, "Hello, Frank. This is Sam Spade. Can you let me have a car with a driver who will keep his mouth shut to go down to the peninsula right away? Just a couple of hours. Right. Have him pick me up at John's on Ellis Street as soon as he can make it." He called another number, his office, held the receiver to his ear for a little while without saying anything, and replaced it on the hook. He went to John's Grill, asked the waiter to hurry his order of chops, baked potato, and sliced tomatoes, ate hurriedly, and was smoking a cigarette in his office with his coffee when a thick-set youngish man with a plaid cap set askew above pale eyes and a tough, cheery face came into the grill and to his table. "All set, Mr. Spade? She's full of gas and raring to go." "Swell." Spade emptied his cup and went out with the thick-set man. You know where Ancho Avenue or Road or Boulevard is in Burlingame?" "Nope, but if she's there, we can find her." "Let's do that," Spade said, as he sat beside the chauffeur in the dark Cadillac sedan. 26 is the number we want, and the sooner the better, but we don't want to get pulled over at the front door. We don't even want anybody to see us as we pull up." "Correct." They rode half a dozen blocks in silence. The chauffeur said, "Your partner got knocked off, didn't he, Mr. Spade?" "Uh-huh." The chauffeur was clucked. "She's a tough racket. You can't have it for mine. You can have it for mine." "Well, the hack drivers don't live forever." "Maybe that's right." The thick-set man concealed. "But, just the same, it'll always be a surprise to me if I don't." Spade stared straight ahead at nothing, and thereafter, until the chauffeur, tired of making conversation, replied with uninterested yeses and nos. At a drugstore in Burlingame, the chauffeur learned how to reach Ancho Avenue. 10 minutes later, he stopped the sedan near a dark corner, turned off the engine and the lights, and waved his hand at the block ahead. "There she is," he said. "She ought to be on the other side, maybe the third or fourth house." Spade said, "Right," and got out of the car. "We may have to leave in a hurry, so maybe restart that engine." He crossed the street and went up to the other side. Far ahead on a lone street burned a light. Warmer lights dotted on the night side of either side where the houses were spaced half a dozen to a block. A high, thin moon was cold and feeble as a distant street light. A radio droned through the open windows of a house on the other side of the street. In front of the second house, from the corner, Spade halted. On one of the gate posts that were massive, out of all proportion to the fence flanking them, a 2 and 6 of pale metal caught the light, and that was it. A square white card was nailed over them. 26. Putting his face close to the card, Spade could see that it was for sale or rent. There was no gate between the posts. Spade went up the cement walk to the house. He stood still on the walk at the foot of the porch steps for a long moment. No sound came from the house. The house was dark except for another pale square card nailed on its door. Spade went up to the door and listened. He could hear nothing. He tried to look through the door. It was glass, and there was no curtain to keep his gaze out, but it was dark. He tiptoed to a window and then to another. They, like the door, were uncurtained glass except for inner darkness. He tried both doors. They were locked. He tried the door. It was locked. He left the porch and, stepping carefully over an unfamiliar ground, walked through the weeds around the house. The side windows were too high to be reached. The back door and one back window he could reach, but they were locked. Spade went back to the gatepost and, cupping the flame between his hands, held up his lighter up to the for sale sign, or maybe rent sign. It bore the printed name and address of a San Mateo real estate dealer and a line penciled in blue, key at 31. Spade returned to the sedan and asked the chauffeur, "Got a flashlight?" "Sure." He gave it to Spade. "Can I give you a hand at anything?" "Maybe." Spade got out of the sedan. "We'll ride up to number 31. You can use your lights." Number 31 was a square gray house across the street from, but a little further up than 26. Lights glowed in the downstairs windows. Spade went up to the porch and rang the bell. The dark-haired girl of 14 or 15 opened the door. Spade, bowing and smiling, said, "I'd like to get the key to number 26. "I'll call Papa," she said, and went back to the house calling, "Papa." A plump, red-faced man, bald-headed and heavily mustached, appeared carrying a newspaper. Spade said, "I'd like to get the key to 26. The plump man looked doubtful. He said, "The juice is not on." "You couldn't see anything." Spade patted his pocket. "I've got a flashlight." The plump man looked more doubtful. He cleared his throat uneasily and crumpled the newspaper in his hand. Spade showed him one of his business cards, put it back in his pocket, and said, in a voice very low, "We got a tip that there might be something hidden there." The plump man's face and voice were eager. "Wait a minute," he said. "I'll go with you." A moment later, he came back with a brass key attached to a black and red tag. Spade beckoned to the chauffeur as he passed the car, and the chauffeur joined them. "Anybody been looking at the house lately?" Spade asked. "Not that I know of," the plump man replied. "Nobody's been to it for me or asking for the key in a couple of months." The plump man marched ahead with the key until he had gone up to the porch. Then he thrust the key into Spade's hand, mumbled, "Here you are," and stepped aside. Spade unlocked the door and pushed it open. There was silence and darkness. Holding the flashlight dark in his left hand, Spade entered. The chauffeur came close behind him, and then, at a little distance, the plump man followed them. They searched the house from bottom to top, cautiously at first, then, finding nothing, boldly. The house was empty, unmistakably. There was nothing to indicate it had been visited in weeks. Saying, "Thanks, that's all," Spade left the sedan in front of the Alexandria. He went to the hotel desk, where the young man with the dark, grave face said, "Good evening, Mr. Spade." "Good evening." Spade drew the young man to the end of the desk. "These Gutmans, up in 12C, are they in?" The young man replied, "No," darting a quick glance at Spade. Then he looked away, hesitated, looked at Spade again, and murmured, "A funny thing happened in connection with them this evening, Mr. Spade. Somebody called the emergency hospital and told them there was a sick girl up there." "And there wasn't?" "Oh, no. There was nobody up there. They went out earlier this evening," Spade said. "Well, these practical jokers, they have to have their fun. Thanks." He went to a telephone booth, called the number, and said, "Hello? Mrs. Perrine? Is Effie there?" "Yes, please. Thanks." "Hello, Angel. What's the good word?" "Fine, fine. I'll hold it. I'll be out in 20 minutes, right?" Half an hour later, Spade rang the doorbell of the two-story brick building in 9th Avenue. Effie Perrine opened the door. Her boyish face was tired and smiling. "Hello, boss," she said. "Enter." She said in a low voice, "If Ma says anything to you, Sam, be nice to her. She's all up in the air." Spade grinned reassuringly and patted her shoulder. She put her hands on his arm. "Miss O'Shaughnessy?" "No," he growled. "I ran into a plant." "Are you sure it was her voice?" "Yes." He made an unpleasant face. "Well, it was hooey." She took him into a bright living room, sighed, and slumped down at one end of a Chesterfield, smiling cheerfully at him, though through her weariness. He sat behind her and asked, "Everything went okay? Nothing said about the bundle?" "Nothing. I told them what you wanted me to tell them, and they seemed to take it for granted that the phone call had something to do with it, and that you were out running it down." "Dundee there?" "No, Hoff and Ogar, or something, and others. I didn't know. I talked to the captain, too." "They take you down to the hall?" "Oh, yes. And they asked me loads of questions, but it was all, routine." Spade rubbed his palms together. "Swell," he said, and then frowned. Though I guess they'll think up plenty to put me on when we meet. That damn Dundee will. Anyway, and Brian, he moved his shoulders. Anybody you know outside of the police come around? Yes. She sat straight up. That boy, the one who brought the message from Gutman, was here. He didn't come in, but the police left the corridor open while they were here, and I saw him standing there. You didn't say anything? Oh, no. You had said not to. So I didn't pay any attention to him. The next time I looked, he was gone. Spade grinned at her. Damn lucky for you, sister. And the coppers got there first. Why? He's a bad egg. That lad, poison. Was the dead man Jacoby? Yes. He pressed his hands and stood up. I'm going to run along. You better hit the hay. You're all in. She rose. Sam, what is it? He stopped her words with his hand on her mouth. Save it till Monday, he said. I want to sneak out before your mother catches me and gives me hell for dragging her lamb through the gutters. Midnight was a few minutes away when Spade reached his home. He put his key into the door and unlocked it. Heels clicked rapidly on the sidewalk behind him. He let go the key and wheeled. Bridget O'Shaughnessy ran up the steps to him. She put her arms around him and hugged him, panting. Oh, I thought you'd never come. Her face was haggard, distraught, shaken by the tremors that shook her from head to toe. With the hand not supporting her, he felt the key again, opened the door, and half lifted her inside. You've been waiting? He asked. Yes. Panting, spaced her words in a doorway up the street. Can you make it all right? He asked. Or shall I carry you? She shook her head against his shoulder. I'll be all right when I get where I can sit down. They rode up to Spade's floor in an elevator and went around to his apartment. She left his arm and stood beside him, panting, both hands to her breast. While he unlocked the door, he switched on the passageway light. They went in. He shut the door with his arm and put his arm around her again, took her back towards the living room. When they were within a step of the living room light, the living room light went on. The girl cried out and clung to Spade. Just inside the living room door was the fat man, Gutman, and he stood there smiling benevolently at them. The boy Wilmer came out of the kitchen behind them. Black pistols were gigantic in his small hands. Cairo came from the bathroom. He too had pistols. Gutman said, Well, sir, we were all here, as you can see, waiting just for you. Now, let's come in and sit down, be comfortable and talk. And that, my friends, is the end of chapters 16 and 17. We will continue tomorrow night with the Maltese Falcon. Thank you for joining me. This has been Indian Holmes. Love to you all. Good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.